It appears sometimes you do something else after waiting a long time for something. Only after does what you were waiting for happen, leaving you to say, if I only waited longer. It doesn't matter if you waited longer, because it wouldn't have happened until you did something else. Then there is trying to avoid one fundamental fate, only to have it happen anyway, superficially different. Hello, today is June 2022, and before I get into the topic of this video, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to find interesting as I'm revisiting older topics I've talked about, and I've even mentioned this over the past few years, what this video is going to be about. But before I get into that, I want to highlight something. I've said repeatedly that everything ties in together, and it's important to understand as much as you can on all sorts of different topics, whether they're direct, indirect, related, unrelated, and remote from each other. And this is how we can get a better understanding of what's happening, for example, in the world today and why. And we also have a better understanding of our life around us and even ourselves. And I just want to highlight this. And this is why I expand from topics, for example, that I speak on with first-hand knowledge and my own personal life experiences, whether they be professional or personal. And it's very important to have this deep understanding. And if there's going to be a solution to any type of problem, you have to have the foundation understood. If you don't understand what's going on and all the peripherals that surround it, there's going to be no solution. There's going to be no correcting anything or changing anything. And I just want to stress this. I can't stress this enough. And I lose a lot of people because, for example, I might talk about firsthand knowledge, for example, whistleblowing, exposing sex trafficking, or police, judicial, political corruption in the province of Alberta. But then I go off on these tangents, and these tangents that give better understanding. Anyway, just something to think about. Now, one of the things that I've talked about, I remember when this first came out, there's actually going to be two parts to this. I remember when this came out, and I was more intrigued with what's really behind all this, who's behind all this, what's really being studied here. And the first example I'm going to talk about is the word Yanny and Laurel. Now, there's an audio clip that came out some years ago, and depending on, I guess, the person, they either hear the word Yanny or Laurel. Now, I'm going to play this audio for you, and I want you to listen carefully, and then I'm going to expand on that.
Yanny, 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 Yanny.
Now, it doesn't matter which you heard, for example, Laurel or Yanny. My point with highlighting this is really who is behind it and why. Now, there are obviously always official stories to things like this, and I think it was about a year or two after this came out, the official stories started coming out and who was behind it and everything else. But I just want to highlight something, how this online social experiments, and there have been many online social experiments, and I'm only going to be using two of them in this video, tell something. Now, let's take, for example, and this might sound conspiratorial or whatever you want to call it, I just want you to think about something. These type of experiments can tell or give some sort of overview on the population. Who hears what, for example. Now, this is an audio example experiment. And as I said, there's many other kind of experiments that have been going on for a long time. And even the social justice movement are experiments. And there's many social justice movements. And it's just interesting how all these things can really reflect on where the population is at. For example, when is a good time to impose an agenda? Okay. Now, the other example that I want to use in this video is the color of the dress, blue or white. Now, when this came out people were saying that they seen one or the other, and since apparently people are saying that they see a shade in between. Now, originally people were having friendly arguments online, blue or white. Now there's these gold stripes in the dress, but it's the color in the background. And again, as always, there's an official story that comes out after the fact, and even some explanations as to why. But I'm also highlighting this as well with the audio version, how these online social experiments can give a really good view, especially the more people that participate, gives a really good cross-section of where society is at. How many, for example, will see or hear one versus the other? And whatever is the conclusion is, or the basis of this thing, they can say, oh, more people see and hear this, so perhaps it's a good time to start slowly introducing an agenda or something. And a lot of people look at these type of social, especially the online social experiments, as just fun, nonchalant, they participate, not thinking anything of it. But we also say, for example, in social media, we see a lot of people posting and reposting, sometimes even ridiculous questions, but they're posting these things, and some people anyway, are participating, answering the question like something to do with the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s, or do you remember this? And they'll show a picture of something from the 60s or whatever. And these are all online social experiments that people treat as fun and games. But you have to remember, whether it be social media or these random online social experiments with sound or visual, someone's monitoring all these things. And even if the person, say somebody decides to do something randomly on their own, does so innocently, someone else is taking interest in it and monitoring, let's see where this goes. And they haven't had to invest anything into a social experiment. Why am I highlighting this? Give some insight as to how, perhaps even why, the world is the way it is right now, and perhaps what we've been going through for the past few years. And when you start looking at a cross-section of, say, for example, people who accept official narratives to people who are not, and the people in between, and you start contrasting that to these online social experiments, it starts to tell something. Now, I've talked a lot about the liberal arts theoretical pseudoscience of psychology, and I've said before that speculation of observation is not science in itself. And these people can see, they study, what you do is you study human behavior, and there's very predictable things. For example, when you look at the Milgram experiment, the Ash experiment, the Stanford experiment, when you start looking at all these experiments, you can see that there's patterns, I'm going to use this as a descriptive, that are programmed into people. And you can kind of anticipate, for example, what an individual or group would do in this situation. It's not always accurate, but generally speaking, it might apply to most people, right? So all these online social experiments test the waters, and they start making some sort of conclusions. Now, I've talked about how many people on any side of an argument are, as a descriptive, NPC types. And when you have enough of people who will, for example, accept an official narrative and go along with whatever is being imposed, there you go. And the other people who say see or hear things differently are going, what are you doing? What's going on? And I was going to finish off by saying, we see division after division in society among people, and especially when it comes to social justice movements. Somebody might say, for example, one thing and everyone in their group or whatever is like, yes, yes, yes. And even say two things that people agree to. But then there'll be something else that they'll say, and people are going, no, that's stupid. And then we get into what I've said in my previous video, this whole cancel culture thing and everything else. So we have division after division, and even when there's unity, for example, on a particular topic, there's still divisions within that. And it's these micro fractures within society that have no cohesion. And I'm just going to say one last word, that the people, for example, who are imposing, the elitist types, the elites, whatever you want to call them, the Illuminatis, whatever, they have generational commitment to whatever they're doing. Whereas the people, the common person, they're barely making it for the moment. Entertainment right now. Anyway, just things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people say, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.